Oh, first of all, as always, I always thank the guests, and it's great that you can join me, Mark. I've been so excited. I've got lots that I want to chat about. Even more excited, it's one of these shows where I can see you as well. I can see you. I can see lots of great guitars behind you as well. So thank you very much for giving me some of your time today, Mark.
Oh, my pleasure, Dave. And yeah, there's probably too many guitars, but they all have their, I guess there's never too many because they all have their purpose and they have their voices that contribute in different ways, you
Yeah.
know?
Do you have a favourite of those that are behind you?
You know, that's a good question. And there are
Is it like
others,
picking
but
favourite
I
kids?
really, say again, Dave?
Is it like picking favourite children and all, that sort of question where you
It
love them
is,
all,
man.
really? Yeah.
You know, my favorite, I think if I had to have one guitar, I think the most versatile guitar in the universe is a Telecaster, is a
Mm.
Fender Telecaster. Although I have a Nash Telecaster, which is very much like the it's like the old Fenders. It's made in the States, and they actually relic it. You know, they make it look like it's old. But
Yeah.
this guitar, which looks very much like a 51 broadcaster or something. Um, this is probably the most versatile guitar in the world. Where a Stratocaster is much more specific,
Yeah.
um, and a Les Paul is very versatile. Strat's very versatile, but using the tone control and the pickup combinations and the volume control, you can cover, I think, the broadest area of music with a Telecaster.
Yeah.
It has a lot of character, but it's also it's a humble guitar. You know, it's a great working man's guitar.
A little bit
Yeah.
different to your first nylon stringed guitar that you got as a kid, then, yeah?
You know, I did get my first guitar wasn't, it was a Sakova nylon string guitar. And I didn't, it was just, that was the guitar that they offered like a couple weeks of guitar lessons at this music store, you know? And I didn't know, it was like, it was kind of a crappy guitar, but, and also when you play nylon strings, you don't develop calluses very,
Ah,
takes a
yeah,
while,
yeah,
because they're soft,
yeah.
But I just started actually. I've had this other nylon string guitar. It's an Aria. It's probably from the mid '70s, and every once in a while it's a whole other voice. You know, I mean, I play a lot of acoustic guitars on I usually write on acoustic
Yeah.
guitar, but the nylon string has a softer voice. You know, so yeah, but that's very interesting that you knew that. I had a nylon string was the first guitar.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you're very, very talented with music. You were born to work within music. Why the guitar when of all the instruments that there are? Is there any particular reason that you gravitated towards that?
Yeah, and I don't feel like I had any say in the matter. I had an older cousin. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and at 9 years old, we moved to New Jersey, and it was tremendous culture shock. In Brooklyn, New York, I lived in the housing projects, and all my friends were black and Irish and Jewish and Puerto Rican and Italian. It was a true melting pot. And we moved to New Jersey, and it was mostly white. I would say it was 99% white, but there was also an undercurrent of prejudice and racism that I never experienced before. So that was troubling, and at that young age, it affected me. You know, I grew up I was born in the '60s. I kind of grew up more in the '70s, but I remember as a child seeing on TV blacks being hosed, like fire hoses, hosing them down, and attack dogs, attacking them, and images of lynchings, of people, hanging from trees, and this affected me greatly. It's like, why is why are these people being treated like
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
And they were my parents didn't instill any to them. It was like they were our friends. They were welcome in our home. There was never anything. It's like, well, he's black, so maybe you shouldn't hang out with him. There was never any of that.
Mm.
So I was very affected by it, and anyway, we went to visit my cousin who still lived in Brooklyn, and he was 2 years older, and I always looked up to him. And I went to his house this one time, and he had a guitar, and he'd already taken a couple lessons, and he knew some chords, and I was just like, that was it, man. I never turned back. That was like the holy grail, and I didn't even realize that at that moment, the kind of decision that would affect the rest of my life was being made, and it wasn't conscious. It was just sort of synchronicity, or some kind of cosmic occurrence. And that's what got me through, man. It's always gotten me through, like, dealing with challenges in life and struggles. It was a place I could always turn, and there was always, as long as I gave it unconditional love, I got it back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what I put into it, I got back. And I wanted so badly. Even I started at 11 years old, and I just wanted to I really wanted to be a great musician from the beginning. And I put a lot of time in. So by the time I was, 13, 14 years old, I could play. And then I started playing with people much older that, they were I started playing in clubs at a very young age. And it's sort of like the thing that's kept me alive and on the planet. And it's led me to meeting great people and having transcendent experiences, So
I mean,
that's how it happened. My cousin, my cousin Steven.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like, just things like that, how it can affect the course of your life. You go there's the guitar, and then that took you on this path. It really is quite amazing when you look back on it.
It is. It's such a, it's in a moment, it's like and maybe that day, maybe if his guitar was in the closet and he didn't feel like playing it, I would have, because you always have that when you at that age, you always have someone that's like, you kind of look up to them, like, they're cool, man. For some reason, they're just a little bit cooler than other people. And he still plays, but more as a hobby,
Mm-hmm.
But that became the center of the universe at a tender age.
And you were only 17 when you joined Night Flyer as well, weren't you? 17.
Yeah, well, Night Flyer was a real turning point. I started writing songs at about 15, but mostly music. I didn't really get a handle on, I didn't start thinking about writing lyrics till a little bit later. Mm-hmm. But the lead singer and songwriter, this guy Ron Orlando, it was his band Night Flyer. I answered an ad in a local New Jersey paper. And it said, whatever, a Jersey original band, seeking guitarist, and recording at Record Plant. Now, Record Plant, for those that don't know, was this studio in New York City where, by the way, Jimi Hendrix recorded his Electric Ladyland album before he opened Electric Ladyland Studios. John Lennon did his first couple solo records there, if not even more than that, even most of his solo records. Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic, Johnny Winter, Still Alive and Well, Kiss's first couple albums. I mean, really, half the sonic landscape of our youth was recorded there. So I was like, I got to go audition for this band, and I really liked their music, and at that time I was practicing a lot, and these guys were like a more traditional rock and roll band with a Jersey kind of, there was like the singer had like a little bit of a Southside Johnny thing, but not because he was into Southside Johnny. It was just, there was an R&B influence, which is interesting that I would be attracted to that. And then meeting Stevie Van Zandt so many years later, but we went in, I auditioned, and these guys were like 10, 15 years older than me, but they saw how hungry I was for the gig, and I learned the music that I needed to. I came very prepared, and they said, great, we want you in the band, and this Saturday, we're going to Record Plant to continue recording our record.
Oh, great.
So their friend, this guy, Paul Prestopino, he was as it turned out, he was head of maintenance, the maintenance department at the studio. But he's also a phenomenal musician that played all string instruments. You know, he played mandolin and banjo and dobro, and he, in fact, he played on a lot of those records. You know, he played on Toys in the Attic. He played on Aerosmith Rocks, Johnny Winter Records. Whenever they needed a utility guy, which is what they call someone that played many instruments, they would call Paul. Paul was there, 12 hours a day, fixing tape recorders. And, he was also a session musician. So Paul started out with the Chad Mitchell Trio and John Denver on the road, and he got this gig at Record Plant. And anyway, that was like 1969 when they first opened. John Denver wanted actually him to be his musical director and go on the road with him. But wow. Paul was he just had a daughter, he just had a new baby, and he really liked being close to home, So he kept working there. Anyway, 10 years later, I joined this band and we're recording at Record Plant. So it's sort of like a dream, sort of surreal thing that happened, But and then that's when I got the bug about producing, and I just felt like I was finally really getting into the music business, the actual heartbeat, where it all occurs, in New York. Before that, I was just kind of playing bars and trying to, feeling kind of lost in how I would get from point A to point B in the business. Like I knew I wanted to get ahead, but I never knew how it would happen, And I think if your intention is strong enough, you just keep doing what you're doing. If you're talented and focused, with a little bit of luck, things just occur, that lead you to where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's it. So, you've got the passion, you've got the talent, and everything else just because you love doing what you're doing, you just keep doing it, don't you? And things hopefully then just fall into place and do that.
Self-perpetuating.
Yeah, exactly. What I want to do is I want to spend some time in the 80s with you, Mark, because like you, I was born in the 60s. My musical memories, the 70s was mostly listening to chart stuff here in the UK, everything, I'd buy the singles that were in the charts. And it wasn't until 1979 that I got into rock music. And then, it's like Kiss and Judas Priest and Scorpions and all those. And so, of course, through the 80s and all the big rock scene through the 80s was like fantastic for me. And you'll know where I'm going with this in a minute because I've always loved Lee Aaron. I've got all of her albums. I saw her. She supported Bon Jovi over here on their 78 degrees 100 Fahrenheit tour. So I saw her over here in Manchester actually, on there. And for anybody that doesn't know, it's one of my favourite songs as well, "Line of Fire." Which if you'd like to tell everybody the stories about "Line of Fire" and how important that song is to you, Mark.
Oh man, that was my first cut as a songwriter. 1985.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, I think it's like 36 years ago.
It's scary how quickly time's gone since then.
Say again?
How quickly time's gone. It's scary, isn't it? Since
my God. I mean, right. Man, you gotta really try to, it's so important that we stay present and try to, enjoy this process, man. Cause it is, when you're a kid, it's like, man, I can't wait till I'm older, but no, you could wait. Because it's going to be faster than you know. Yes. But Lee Aaron, it's funny. My manager at the time, a guy by the name of Barry Bergman, Barry kind of came out of the publishing side of the business. He worked at Mark's Music in New York and was very instrumental in the careers of primarily AC/DC. Mm-hmm. He was one of the true believers from the beginning. And Barry's mentioned in a lot of biographies about AC/DC in the books, and also Meatloaf. Barry literally held the program director, I think it was WAPP in New York, held him almost like captive or like prisoner in his apartment. He wouldn't let him leave until he agreed to play 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad, which was the song. Meatloaf sold 500,000 records in New York on that first record, on Bat Out of Hell.
Wow.
And Barry, who's another one who's very focused, and Barry believed in that record. And anyway, I met Barry a couple years after that. And Barry saw something in me. I met him at a session, one of Barry's producers was producing this artist that I was hired to play guitar for, but I was also writing songs, and I was about 21 years old. And I was really just getting, I had a home studio, and I was just getting very serious about songwriting. I even stopped gigs because I'd been gigging a lot for a bunch of years, even at that age, 5-6 nights a week, playing cover music and making a living, but just feeling like it was a means to an end. And, I didn't feel it was going anywhere. And Barry was at this session when I was playing guitar, and he came when I was doing guitar solos, and he was very taken aback, and he was really impressed. And he called me a couple of days after the session, and I met him briefly, but I knew who he was because his producer had told me all about him. And he said, "Oh, Steven," his producer, Stevie Sharf, said, "You're writing some songs. Why don't you?" And he had an office at Mark's Music then. He was managing, but he had this little. They had an office there for him. I guess he was renting it, or after he left Mark's Music, he went to United Artists Publishing. He was actually the vice president of United Artists Publishing for about a couple of years. Then he went out on his own, had an office at Mark's Music. I go up to his office. I play him my songs. He says, "I got some good news and some bad news." He says, I hear a lot of potential here, but you gotta just keep writing. Just go home, write some more songs. I'll listen to them anytime." So I felt like this was the next step in having someone in the business that I could bring my music to and get professional advice, and someone that if they love something, they would have access to the record companies and producers and artists where you can actually have your music placed and take it to the next level, So anyway, a couple of years went by, and I was bringing him music every couple months. Like I'd go home, I'd write 10 songs and I record them. And there was a lot of nights I'd go home, with my head between my, what did I say? Your head between your legs, or I don't know. I was, sad that he didn't love my songs yet, but I was determined. And anyway, so I finally brought him some good songs. We went on a trip to Toronto, met this guy, Paul Gross, who was working with Bob Ezrin. So Bob Ezrin, who produced Dark Side of the Moon. One of the great producers of all time, was the producer of Lee Aaron's record. Paul, I guess he was the executive and Paul was the producer. Paul heard my song Line of Fire and felt it would be great for Lee, for Lee Aaron. And that was a fantastic occurrence because it instilled the the belief that things really could happen. It wasn't just a pipe dream,
Yeah. It's such a great song as well, Mark. It really is.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. It's funny. I had this, I had the chorus, and what was that? Step into my line of fire. To love, you're my heart's desire. So I had that chorus, and I had some lyrics, and Barry had another songwriter that he was managing, a guy by the name of Bob Halligan. Now, Bob wrote. Bob was actually, when I met Bob, he was already a pretty successful songwriter. He wrote "Take These Chains" for Judas Priest. He wrote "Some Heads Are Gonna Roll," and Bob had a bunch of hits throughout the years. A song was a big hit in the States, "Don't Close Your Eyes" for a band called Kicks. Anyway, Barry felt like maybe the verses need some help, So Bob, who I was actually making all of Bob's publishing demos, So Bob would come out to my house, my parents' house. I was still living with my parents in my early 20s. And we would make these demos of these songs, that he would pitch, to these different artists, like Michael Bolton or Cher or a lot of these rock bands like Judas Priest. And he was getting a lot of cuts. So Barry felt like there's something really great here. Maybe just get together with Bob, So actually Bob wrote like really 25% of the song. And then we finished the demo, and me and Bob sang it, and Paul loved it for Lee. So Yeah, it's funny how things occur, you know.
It is, yeah. And I still play it loud today. It's, all
Oh
these years
man,
later.
I
So.
haven't heard it in years, man. It's I'm surprised I remembered the chorus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And another song, I mean, regular listeners to the show know there's certain albums I call like perfect albums. I love them so much. And one
yeah,
of them, and again, you'll know where I'm going to go with this. One of them is Bonfire, Fireworks.
man,
I love that album. Every song on it I absolutely love. One of them being American Nights, which again,
man.
if you want to, tell the listeners all about American Nights, again, such a great song.
You know, Michael Michael Wagner was producing Bonfire, and after I got the cut with Lee Aaron, it sort of all of a sudden, like kind of like the doors opened up that, okay, in the 80s, a lot of these rock bands or what they called hair bands,
Mhm.
they would write album tracks. Like they were more performers than songwriters. So they needed help, with writing radio songs,
Yeah.
So when after the Lee Aaron thing, all of a sudden, like it's like the floodgates kind of opened up. But Bonfire, they came. I think I was still living in New Jersey then. They came to my house, like three or four of them, and we wrote a couple songs that day. And I think one was American Nights. Yeah, and I think it actually did very well in Germany, and I
Oh,
guess it
yeah.
was out in England.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know how well it did in the States. It's funny because you hear, like the music scene was so different here in the '80s than Europe, and the UK.
Yeah.
Um, but I wrote that, and then on the next record, I think I had maybe a few more songs on the album after that. But American Nights was kind of the beginning of that. Yeah,
Yeah, because you had who's fooling who on
who's
the.
fooling who?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
that's right, man.
yeah. And
Yeah,
again, it's
you
crazy.
you, you do your you do your research, Dave.
Well, I know I love the album so much and the songs so much. So, like
Ah,
I say, and again, regular listeners know that I only do interview shows with people whose work I really love, and then. Of course, all your music, and we're going to come up to your new music as well. We're going to talk about that. But going into your musical history, I was, oh my God, he wrote that and that and that. There's such a part of my history growing up. And,
that's awesome.
and seeing those bands, I saw Bonfire on the Fireworks tour. I saw the Aaron back in '85. And,
Man,
it's again, listening to songs, it just takes you back to that period of time as well.
it
It's good
does,
for the
man.
soul.
It's funny. I just got the test pressing for my album, which will be out in July
Mm,
today, and I had an old turntable. It didn't work anymore, so I went out. I needed a new turntable, and just the vinyl experience that we
oh,
grew up with.
yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, you'd sit on cross leg on the carpet. You'd open your album,
Yeah.
and you go to the turntable. You put the needle on the vinyl. You hear some scratches and pops,
Yeah.
and then you were transported to another dimension.
Mm,
And you had this 12 by 12, like a book where not only a lot of times you had the lyrics, but you knew who the musicians were.
yeah.
You knew who the songwriters were. You knew who the technicians were.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, and it's like, oh, and they're giving thanks to this person. You go, I wonder who that person is. And then you'll
Yeah.
see that person's name on another record. So it kind of gave you I think nowadays people get shit too fast, and they're constantly bombarded with sound bites,
Yeah.
and everything is so fleeting. I feel like we grew up in the Renaissance period where, I mean, I absorb when I listen to a Jimi Hendrix record, or I listen to a Beatles record, or I listen to a Bob Dylan record. I felt like I was, like they're inviting you into their home, and it's like now it's like kids think, Britney Spears, or obviously, I think Taylor Swift, she essentially writes her songs, but most people don't know who the guitar players are, who the
Yeah.
drummers
Yeah.
are. I mean, we were such fans of the musicians in these bands,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and then you found out, oh, Bob Dylan wrote that song for the band, or for for this one, or the Staple Singers, like all this great music, and you realize how it was all this incestuous web of, people helping each other create music.
Yeah.
now it's, bombarded with, so much that you just to be able to sit in a meditation and listen to a vinyl record, man. So I did that today. I had to listen to the test pressing.
Oh, nice.
And I just kind of got flooded with memories of being, 13 years old in my bedroom, and then actually at the time to learn, like if it was a fast Johnny Winter lick or a Alvin Lee or a Jimi Hendrix guitar lick, it's like, how am I going to learn that? Nowadays, kids go to YouTube and they have someone that, probably took the time when they were younger to do maybe what I did and slowed it. What I did was I recorded on a tape recorder and play it back at half speed. So you would hear the lick and it would be one octave, exactly one octave. So it would be the same key except an octave lower at half speed, you know? So, if the lick was fast, like, but it would be an octave lower, but it would be. So you could go, and that's how you learn those licks, That's how I learned those licks. Nowadays, you just go on YouTube and there's a guy, it's like, here's how you play this lick, and he slows it down, and it's like, it's like you don't have to be creative in finding answers. It's like all the answers are there. So it's like, I think there's something to be said for putting the work in, and I think you get more out of it. It gets in your cells,
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. I mean, you've definitely put the work into it because you're renowned for being so hardworking, and you've written and produced for so many people. I mean, please tell the listeners, some of the people you've written and produced for, because what a great list of names this is.
Well, in recent years, I've been co-producing Stevie Van Zandt's records, the Disciples of Soul. Back in the day, I'd written a bunch of songs with a guy by the name of Mitch Malloy, who was a great pop rock singer on RCA Records. A band called Helix in Canada. I actually produced a couple of their records and probably had 15 cuts with them.
Yeah, I saw those in the 80s too. There's another band I watched in the 80s.
They were big in the 80s. Yeah. And they're still around. They're still doing their thing.
Yeah.
Who else? A band called Harem Scarum, a band from Canada. Another one of these. With Helix also, they were really good performers, good musicians, but they didn't have hooks. They didn't have hooks in their songs for radio, which is the reason Mitch Malloy, he just got signed to RCA. They weren't hearing hooks. So so they would call a guy like me or Bob Halligan that had a sense of melody, memorable melodies, to write with them. I also, I wrote a couple songs, a few songs actually with a guy by the name of Freddie Kersey and Steve DeMarchi. They were with the band. I wrote with them when they were with Alias, but before that, they were Sheriff. So they had a very big hit, When I'm With You. Baby, I get chills when I'm with you. When I met them, that album, which came out around 1985, was DOA. It was over. So they made this great record. Nothing happened with it. And 2 years later, when they were like, wondering what they were going to do with their lives, some DJ in Las Vegas started playing the record, and it caught on and it became a #1 song. So how do things happen? Who the hell knows? They just happen. So anyway, I was friends with Freddie and Steve. So we wrote a few songs in the early 90s. Now, what happened was when grunge came in, all this music that I was working on, I had hits. I had songs like flying up charts. Mm-hmm. When grunge came in, sort of like the pop rock thing was basically like someone dropped an atomic bomb on it.
Yeah.
And it was essentially Nirvana, Smell Like Teen Spirit, when that song came out, and then Soundgarden and all these bands, it just put the kibosh on popular rock music, like things that were on the radio. So that was a rough time for a minute. It was like, and that's when I really started focusing on my own artistry, But anyway, getting back to it, I wrote a bunch of songs with Alias, like their band was called Alias then, Freddie and Steve. And the label was really excited about these songs. Grunge came in. They never put that album out until 2017. I get a note from Steve DeMarchi, Freddie's guitar player and writing partner from Alias. Mark, they're putting our song out that we wrote. It was like 26 years earlier. It finally came out. I mean, it's just this business will, back in the day, you would have to literally wait a year after someone said they were going to record your song. You would have to wait a year to hear like an acetate or maybe the final version, or to find out that they decided not to put it on the album, or, so you kind of lived and died by all these events, and as you get older, I think you learn to, let these things, you can't personalize these things because they'll kill you. They'll take your life.
Yeah, you could just constantly think about it all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm really glad that you mentioned with memorable melodies and hooks and everything, because some of the most memorable, like earworms, you could say, that get into you, and they're so short. Then that's how memorable they are. It's for commercials, because you've written some. Again, when I was reading up some stuff about you with the commercial music that you made as well. I mean, please tell everybody about that, because they are some of the most memorable, because you've only got a set amount of time to get it out there. So it's got to be punchy.
It used to be, I think when we were kids, TV commercials were like 60 seconds, like a minute. So you actually had time to get to your chorus, it's like, don't bore us, get to the chorus, These were like, you would write a 30-second spot, like a 30-second. And I'm a songwriter, so I wouldn't write it wasn't in my nature. And by the way, in a million years, I never planned to ever write a TV ad. It was not something I had seeked out doing. It's sort of just, I was writing with a friend of mine one day, this guy, Marcus Wolf, great guitar player. And we were writing a song for an artist he was working with. And he got a call, and somehow I met this guy at a jingle house, who dealt with the ad agencies. And my friend said, do you want to work on this guy Coke spot with me? And you would just be submitting a demo. Yeah. I said, sure, man. We'll so we wrote this thing, submitted it that day, and it didn't get chosen, but it let this guy, Tony, know that I was a songwriter and I could do things quickly, and I had a recording studio. And, anyway, he started calling me to do these spots, so I submitted a couple things that didn't hit. And then I think it was the third thing he sent to me it was an HIV and STD awareness commercial from Trojan condoms. So I'm thinking, the first thing you think of with Trojan man, it's like it's like, I'm not going to write some corny ass shit. Plus, when I look, they send you just the picture, so I use a program called Pro Tools. I record all my audio on Pro Tools, and it also has capability of scoring to video. So I would drag this video clip. It was a 30-second clip into my Pro Tools session, and I put this clip on, and it's a black screen, and this is my introduction to what I'm writing for. Yeah, it's a black screen that says, 1 out of 4 people with HIV don't tell their partners. So I'm immediately engaged. It's like, this is fucked up. This is crazy, man. It just made you think. It's like, okay, people are dying from AIDS, and HIV, and, people need to tell people, hey, man, you can't be selfish. Just because you need to have sex, you got to tell people what's up, So I was really struck by this. And then the black screen fades into this couple holding hands on a couch. And I just felt like an emotional affinity to this concept. And I had this song laying around, a song called This Life. And I made a short version. I think the first version I sent was probably like a 60-second version. And the guy from the jingle house loved it. He sent it to the ad agency. They loved it. And spent the next couple of weeks, they wanted me to try some edits. And anyway, it pretty much came back to where it originally was. And and it ran for a couple of years on. It was a very controversial ad also because of the subject matter. It's anything, puritanical society, anything having to do with sex or outside the box at that time would just, cause controversy and people protesting against it. But it ran for a couple of years, and it's like being a songwriter, it's mailbox money. You write this thing, you go to sleep at night, and then these checks show up in your mailbox, So it's like, this is cool. I can do my gigs, I can work on my records, and sort of like this is like, all of a sudden has become my my sugar daddy, my way of making a living without, So he just kept calling with things. Then there was a Activia yogurt spot that actually probably ran for 12 years.
Wow.
And it became Activia. I don't know if that was a product that was out in Wales, but it was a very, they had Jamie Lee Curtis do the commercial, and it just kept running and running and running. And same thing, it's like this mailbox money. It's like, did that really happen? Then we did like an Office Depot commercial, like this parody on Taking Care of Business by Bachman Turner Overdrive, a few V8 commercials. And then, it just for a bunch of years, they just kind of kept coming in, and I didn't have to seek it out. It was just sort of like, it's like we were saying before, you stick to something, and somehow the answers, they occur, and if you're supposed to be doing something, I think, however you want to look at it, God or the universe, or you're supported in it, somehow you're able to do what you were put here to do, So I'm thankful for the commercials,
Yeah. And rightly so. So you should be. I mean, especially now. I mean, how much has it changed the way that musicians make their money from what it used to be to what it is now? It's night and day, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. There's no resemblance to when I grew up playing music. I mean, at first it was just, you play in nightclubs, which that still exists. But mainly, you would put a band together, write some songs, get a record, hopefully get a record deal, or if you were a songwriter, get a song placed, and you would make a living this way, or you'd meet an artist and you would produce their record. Or once I had success as a songwriter, I would get calls from record labels, especially when I would write songs with artists for their record. Then the label would say, why don't you just have Marc produce it? We love these demos. Why don't we make a real record, make it a completed record? So now, the last bunch of years I've been touring so much, because nowadays, unless you're touring, like Stevie Van Zandt, he needs to tour to sell records. The records that are being bought today are essentially it's hip hop, it's R&B and hip hop, and it's kids buying this music. And there's a few people that are selling millions of records. Yeah. Most people are selling, if they're lucky, tens of thousands. If they're really lucky, hundreds of thousands of records. Whereas before, these would have been multi-platinum records, tens of millions of records. Yeah. And now they're down to like 100,000. And a lot of it's just being sold on tours, as in at the merch stands. That's why the record companies got into all these 360 deals, where before they never thought about merchandising and what sold, hats and T-shirts. Yeah. But now they if they're going to distribute your records and give you money for promotion, they want a piece of everything. So it would be 360, the whole enchilada. Yeah.
I mean, you've mentioned Stevie Van Zandt there, and again, everybody would be dying to know your history with him and your continued working with him and the Disciples of Soul. I mean, what's the story with that? I mean, because that's such a great project to be involved with, and all of the work that you're doing as well.
Stephen, we've had many common friends throughout the years. Growing up playing music in New Jersey, when I was a kid, we used to go to the Stone Pony in Asbury Park. And there was a couple of years, every time I'd go to the Pony, Bruce would be there, he'd be hanging out. He was between record deals. he may have been in court, actually with his first manager. So he had a lot of time. So he would come down to the Pony and sit in with these bands. And Southside Johnny was in the area. They were just kind of getting started and making records. And Stephen, of course, wrote all the Southside Johnny songs and was producing them. And then Stephen became an artist himself, and he left he left the E Street Band for a while. And so I became aware of Stephen at a young age and realized that he's a great producer. He's a great writer. And then, as I got older, I realized that, wow, this is the same guy that, was very aware of the apartheid movement and anti-apartheid movement, and, was instrumental in getting Nelson Mandela out of prison. And he wrote the Sun City song, which raised awareness about apartheid and what was going on in South Africa and the plight of South American farmers, that, there was just all this oppression going on. And, people in America and, in a lot of societies and Western societies weren't even aware that there's these issues, that, so he brought to light a lot of these. He became very political,
Yeah.
And, but I felt was raising awareness about things that needed to be, known. So anyway, I got a call. Stephen was producing Darlene Love's, what he called, Stephen named it Introducing Darlene Love. Now, Darlene Love sang on many of the hits from the 60s, all like the Phil Spector. She was part of the Wrecking Crew. And if anyone has seen the Wrecking Crew documentary, it's worth seeing because you really see where this great, this wealth of American music came from and where it was recorded, just like the Muscle Shoals documentary. It really gives you insight into where this music, who was behind this music and how it came about. So Darlene was basically like Phil Spector's pet. She's this amazing singer. She sang all the songs on the Phil Spector Christmas record. So it's this voice that you've heard your whole life. But Phil, who, aside from being a genius, was a maniac and a narcissist, would just kind of keep, he for whatever reason, he kept her down. Mm-hmm. He didn't want her to get as much light as she deserved. And Stephen, who was friends with her for many years, promised her in the early 80s that one day he was going to produce a record for her. Now, 40 years later, 35 years later, he's Introducing Darlene Love. So a couple of my friends, Rich Mercurio and Lee Nadell, a couple great New York session musicians. Richie's been a dear friend for many years. They were playing on Darlene's record, and they got me on the last song on the record, which was a Bruce Springsteen song called Night Closing In. Mm-hmm. So I went to the session. Stephen was producing the record. So as soon as I met Stephen, we started just talking about this common ground that we had. A dear friend of both of ours, a guy by the name of Kevin Cavanaugh, who was the original Asbury Jukes keyboardist. Stephen chose Kevin, Kevin. I'd been doing a lot of gigs with Kevin for years, and we've become very close friends. So we spoke. Kevin had just passed away a couple years earlier, so we were reminiscing about Kevin and the Jersey scene and all these people we knew in common. And so there was an immediate bond of commonality, and it just felt like a friendship immediately.
Yeah.
And then we proceeded to spend the rest of the day working on this Bruce Springsteen song. Stephen rearranged it, as he does most things. He gets into his arrangement head, and he decided to make like a Phil Spector, a big wall of sound arrangement of this song for Darlene. Which means, so we recorded, initially he arranged the rhythm section, which was me, bass, drums, keyboardists, and came up with this arrangement, and then needed to create a wall of sound after the basic tracks were recorded. So everyone went home, and it was just me and Stephen in the studio, and Stephen was having me play these bolero guitar parts, right. So, and that was on a 12 string. And then we'd record the whole song with this part, which was not only a rhythm, but it was creating this landscape. He had me do that 4 times.
Right. Okay.
And then I would play, there would be, let's say, an electric 12-string part. And I would play that after you do the whole track, play that 4 times. And then there was another electric part, and that was 4 times. So Stephen realized that he could throw these things at me and I would be able to pick up on them quickly. Yeah. So we just hit it off. And literally it was a 10-hour day. What was supposed to be a 3-hour recording session turned into a 10-hour day. And so we just kind of created this bond that first day. Months later, the album's coming out, and Stephen calls and says, we're doing Darlene's CD release. We're going to do a show at the Paramount Theater in Asbury Park, and we're going to do 2 shows at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. And I'm not really that happy with her band. And I want you to go down to a rehearsal. I want you to just check out what's going on there and, get back to me what you think, Now, he was supposed to be there the first night. I'm on my way to the rehearsal. He says, I'm not going to be able to make it. So just go check things out, play through the music with everybody. And I realized that Darlene, and Stephen will say, and I would agree, is one of really the true greatest vocalists in pop music of all time. And I reported back to Stephen. I said, the band needs help, So we had this one show. We had the big show. Literally, Stephen, we had a 60-piece orchestra. It was 3 timpani players, percussionists playing like timpani, 12 strings in a section, violins, viola, cellos, brass, 12 piece brass. Plus, underneath that is just a rock and roll rhythm section, 2 guitars, bass drums, 2 keyboardists, Darlene's regular 3 background singers, plus a 30-piece gospel choir. Now, if you could picture the Paramount Theater in Asbury Park, Stephen, who had the curtains closed, when the curtains open, it was like Oz. It was like, and unfortunately, no one videotaped. Oh. No one videotaped. And Stephen, to this day, is so frustrated that it was never captured properly. Because this reveal was like, so picture this, all these layers. It's like the strings are up here, the horns are up here, the percussionist this is on a second tier. Mm-hmm. Underneath was the drummer, the guitar players, the keyboardist. Darlene makes this grand entrance through the middle, like the wizard, Yeah. And Stephen did these shows with us. So now Stephen was singing one duet with Darlene on a song that Elvis Costello wrote for the record, a song called Still Too Soon to Know. Mm-hmm. And Stephen would do 3 of his songs at these shows. And I love Darlene. Darlene's fantastic. But for me, the highlight was doing these Stevie Van Zandt songs. Love on the Wrong Side of Town, which he wrote for Southside Johnny with Bruce. Southside and Stephen wrote that. And then a song called Until the Good Is Gone, which is on Men Without Women, Stephen's first record. And a song called Forever, which I believe was on the same record. That for me was the rock and roll highlight of the night, because we're playing primal rock and roll with Stephen, who's such a badass, great singer, great guitar player. And after the first show, I went up to Stephen. I go, man, you need to be doing this, man. People need to be experiencing this every night. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, maybe I planted a seed by saying that, Anyway, so Stephen says, we did that first show and we go to LA. Stephen says, we'll get through these gigs. I want you to put a whole new band together for her. He rearranged all of her Christmas songs. Darlene's big season is Christmas, She does the whole Bill Spector catalog, of Christmas songs. Christmas Baby, Please Come Home, which she did on David Letterman every Christmas for 30 years. All these great Christmas songs that we grew up with, Steven rearranged all the songs, and after I put this band together, and we went out, and I became Darlene's musical director. Steven said, I want you to protect Darlene, protect these arrangements, make sure she has who she needs as personnel, as musicians. And I spent the next couple of years on the road with Darlene and protecting Steven's, artist and his vision,
Yeah.
So then a couple of years into it, I get a call from Steven that there's this guy, Leo Green, who some people out there may have heard of. Leo Green's dad was one of the big promoter agents, kind of like Sharon Osbourne.
Yeah.
But her last name, her dad was his last name Arden? Anyway, he was the big promoter.
He was.
In London, certainly. And Leo's dad, I forget Leo's dad's first name, but Leo Green's dad was another big promoter in there. Anyway, so Leo found out that Steven was going to be at Bill Wyman's 80th birthday, which was it was held at the O2 in the O2 Arena in London.
Yeah.
So he said, why don't you come and perform at it? So Steven hadn't done his music in 25 years. He hadn't done anything. He'd been with Bruce, he'd done The Sopranos, he did Lilyhammer, but he'd kind of put that whole artist thing aside. So he calls me up and he says, it's a one-off. Leo Green called me. It's this blues festival at the O2 in London. And can you put a band together? We'll rehearse it in New York at my studio, and then we'll go do the show. So I called my best guys. I called Rich Mercurio on drums, Jack Daly, Rich Mercurio, Sarah Bareilles, Dina Menzel. He's played with all these great artists, great drummer, dear friend. Jack Daly, Lenny Kravitz, bass player for 15 years. Great music. He's played on countless hit records, everyone from Joss Stone to Iggy Pop to Janet Jackson. I mean, just everything, Andy Burton, another great musician friend, was with John Mayer, toured with John Mayer for a few years. Cyndi Lauper, Rufus Wainwright, really great musician. So I called my guys as I knew I had to call the best of the best for Steven,
Yeah.
And Eddie Mannion, who was Steven's saxophonist with Southside Johnny, Eddie was going to deal with the horns and put all the horn arrangements together. So me and Eddie joined forces and we started rehearsing. I got a bunch of New York musicians to rehearse. We went to England and hired horn players and background singers in England to do the show. And they were fantastic, by the way, but me and Eddie had to go over and teach them the music before the show.
Yeah.
Like we went about a week before, and to our, happy surprise, the musicians were very well prepared. The rest of the band came over, we rehearsed, we did the show. It was a huge success. And during the rehearsals for the show, Steven said, man, this feels like we did 22 songs, so it was like Southside Johnny songs that Steven has written for Pearl Jam, like I'm a Patriot, his solo tunes, some covers, Groovin' is Easy by Electric Flag. Anyway, he felt like he had this great body of work and he wanted to make a record. So he says, when we get back to New York, we're going to go into my studio and we're going to make a record. So this is the Soulfire record.
Yeah.
We spent about 6 weeks making this record. And in the middle, Steven realized, that how much I was, a lot of artists don't realize what people are doing. They're kind of very self-absorbed possibly, or just not really concerned with anything other than, what concerns them, what's going to affect them, But Steven, who has been in the trenches of many artists, certainly Bruce, and he's worked with Bob Dylan and all these greats, Steven said, me and the engineer, Jeff Sanoff, I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and I want to make you co-producers on my record, which is, it's not really, he didn't have to do that.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
spoke volumes about who he is as a person. He said, I'm going to give you points on the record. Anyway, we finished the record. So to me, Steven can do no wrong. I mean, he's always been one of the most generous, he cares about people. He cares, that that people are comfortable, that they're, fully expressed, So we finished the record. Bob Clearmountain mixes the record. Bob's mixed all the Bruce records, all the Steven records, probably half the records in your collection. Bob Clearmountain is mixed, one of the great mixers of all time. Steven has 2 months left with Bruce. They had a 2-month Australian tour. Steven says, when I come back, we're planning our tour, the Disciples of Soul. And literally, I had 2 months, and I said, you know what, man, I better go in and make my record. Something told me I should go in and, record my new record. So I called, my guys, called Jack and Richie and Andy, and we went in 3 days. We recorded about 15 of my songs.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, we work fast, and we've been working together so long, and we have a pretty good level, like pretty high level of communicating together. We record the 15 songs. I do some preliminary mixes and just leave it. Steven, it was now time to focus on Steven, making sure he had the right band, the right band members, putting the show together, getting the, every aspect of the show, getting the right sound engineer. So we got a British engineer by the name of Richard Sharrett, one of the best in the business. Richard, he's done Peter Gabriel, and he's fantastic. So Steven mixed the orchestra with Gabriel, so we felt like he would be perfect. Gary True, who was the tour manager, another Brit. Gary suggested a lighting technician that we used for a while, and Gary's one of the great tour managers of all time. And we just created this family, this road family. And literally from that time, for 3 years, we do 2 tours. We usually do Europe and the States, the UK. We'd make a record. We'd go out. We do Australia, UK, Europe, States. So for over 3 years, it was nonstop Disciples of Soul, and it really created a tremendous bond, amongst the band. And Steven is to me is like, he's family, he's like a brother. He's like the brother I never had, So so we finished the tour. We do our last show at the Beacon Theater in New York City, November 6th, 2019. And we all go on our merry way, and of course, we won't spend too much talking about it, but a couple months later, this thing happened.
Yeah.
Which they call, this thing, this crazy pandemic that's affected everyone's lives. So in the midst of it, about a month in, me and my girlfriend, it's like, it's all over. It's Armageddon. It's the zombie apocalypse. We're eating pizza every night, drinking, 2-3 bottles of wine. And then I woke up one day and go, after about 2 or 3 weeks of that, we both woke up and it's like, we got to get serious. It's like, you have a choice. This is everyone challenges. People have challenges in their life. Everyone has challenges every day. This is just another one. Yeah. So you have a choice. You could be productive, or you could just, live the life of, debacle and destruction and, let's buy an 8-ball cocaine, let's get some heroin, You could do that, So you have this choice.
Yeah, of course.
Fortunately, none of that happened, But I kind of got a handle on things. Anyway, I was talking to Steven one day, and he says, "What are you doing, man?" I go, "Well, I'm actually finishing mixes on my record that I recorded 4 years ago before you whisked us away into the Stevie Van Zandt abyss, and the Magical Mystery Tour, He said, "Oh man," he said, "I'd love to hear that," So I said, "Great." I sent him I sent him quite a few songs, probably all 15 songs. And he calls me back, and once again he said, Steven said, I have some good news and I got some bad news. And I'm thinking, give me the bad news, man. Let's get that out of the way, you know. So he says he said the good news is I love a lot of these songs. There's some really good songs here. The bad news is I don't think it's done yet. I think we should spend some time working on this together, which I was elated about because I know how brilliant he is as a producer and arranger, you know. So we spent the next couple months, never got in a room together. We did it over the phone and you know, safe and social distance, whatever, you know. And we worked on the arrangements together. I would have friends of mine that had recording studios sing vocal parts, any instrument changes I would do in my studio. And in a couple, 2 or 3 months, the album was done and I mixed it. I mixed it in my studio. And this guy, Bob Ludwig, mastered the record. Now, when I was a kid, sitting cross-legged on the floor, looking at my records, I go, oh, Bob Ludwig mastered this record too. Oh, Bob Ludwig mastered this. You know, so I was very familiar with Bob. In fact, when I produced some Helix records years ago, I would always call Bob to master. You know, he's one of the great mastering engineers. Now, for those at home that don't know what mastering is, when you mix a record, you're balancing all the instruments. You're creating a completed picture and balance of, you know, the relationship between where the drums sit in the mix and the bass and the guitars and the vocal. And you're completing the sound. You're completing the overall complexion of a record. Yeah. Sonically. And then the mastering guy, what he does, it's sort of like the icing. He does the final EQ. It's called equalization of the higher frequencies, the mid-range frequencies, the lower frequencies, and something called compression and limiting, which kind of evens everything out. So when you put a record on or you put a CD on, the whole record, it's not like one song is really loud and one song is really soft. Yeah. It makes it more consistent. And it's really like, you know, it's really the icing on the cake, you know, and Bob, so we had Bob master the record. And then anyway, that's like my Steven journey, which continues. You know, Steven co-produced the record with me, and we just released my first single a couple weeks ago, and the album will be out in July. And so now we're making videos and doing what we can to promote, you know, the singles, and fortunately we're getting a great response. You know, people are loving it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I listened to Shattered a good few times now. I really love it, and I mean, there's little bits in it as well. I'm a sucker for some slide guitar, Mark. And there's
awesome, man.
Yeah, so there's some of that in there. Yeah, give me some slide guitar and I'm in there. It's fine.
Oh, Dave, I'll send you. There's a link. There's a magazine in the States called Guitar World. So I did. It's like a video series that they do, and it's actually I'm demonstrating how the slide part is played on Shattered, the first song. I'll send you the link. You know, Brilliant. We'll exchange. Digits, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
If you like slide, you'll enjoy it.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, I love slide guitar. Yeah,
talks about, you know, just how it's applied to the song. You know? And then another couple songs. We did videos for those too, which will be released as we release our singles, and we're doing, you know, full blown music videos, and you know, the whole all leading up to the release in July.
Oh, well, that's great. I mean, people listening, you know, they follow us now on social media. We've got the website. We'll be promoting all of those and putting links up to the videos and everything too. It'll be great. So it's July then, is it, for the actual release date of the album?
July 9th. July 9th is the official release date of the album. I literally just got the test pressings yesterday. I listened to them on my turntable today, and everything sounds great. Now it's the printer will just finish up the artwork and everything. And
excellent.
Yeah. And I actually, and I'm sure you'd announce this, but my first single, Shattered, we're actually selling the vinyl single, and I'm signing the singles, you know, any friends or fans out there that would like, and we've been selling them in Europe and the UK and the States. And if you go to my website, marcribler.com, I have my previous albums there and my new single. And obviously things it's been a rough year, and I greatly appreciate
Oh, yeah.
everyone's support out there. It's and we've had a really wonderful outpouring of people showing their care
Good.
and concern
Good.
and enjoying the music. So that's it's been a good time. It's been a real bright light, in the midst of a challenging year for people.
Oh,
So
yeah. Well, I'll put all the links on the podcast notes. They'll be up on our website too. And then people
thank
can
you,
go and
thank
support,
you for
which
that.
we always say with all the music-based shows. We always say, support these people, buying the music, buy the merch, support them in whatever way you can, and get the word out there. I'm really looking forward to the new album. I'm really looking forward to, at some stage, you coming back over here, and
Oh
then
man.
we can meet in person and, maybe record another show together in person. That'd be great.
Oh, absolutely, Dave. Maybe when we get closer to the record release, we can do something.
Definitely.
And like I mentioned before, Stephen, the Disciples of Soul, we played in Cardiff probably August. I think it was August of 2019.
Hmm.
We played at the O2 Academy. It was and we love playing for UK audiences, man.
Oh, it'd be great to, get you guys back over here. It'd be
Oh
fantastic
man,
to
it's
see
just
you.
great. We always do a bus tour. Like usually we fly, but we do a bus tour of UK we play Newcastle and Birmingham and we play all over London, we
Wonderful.
just one of our favorite places, just great music audiences, man.
Fingers crossed that you can.
Yes, we're going to
Let's
do
keep
it.
it
It's going to
crossed.
happen, Dave.
Well, for the sake of the edit, Mark, we shall say goodbye. But it's been so good having a chat with you. Not for the last time, I hope. And yeah, hope we meet soon and we chat again soon.
Oh, absolute pleasure, Dave. Thanks for making me feel so at home, brother.
You're welcome, Mark. Thank you.
See you again.